Wardenclyffe wireless power. The lab on Long Island glowed without a single wire attached. You picture coils, sparks, a tall mast reaching into the sky. Nikola Tesla wanted to send power through the earth and the air, free, everywhere, for anyone. He built a tower that looked more like a cathedral than a power station. It promised a world where light arrived like rain. What actually happened? Tesla experimented with resonant systems and high voltage. He proved you can move energy through the air over short distances. Today, we charge phones without cords and beam power to satellites with directed microwaves. But physics puts hard limits on range and loss. The larger the area you try to feed, the more energy bleeds away as heat and stray radiation. Materials and efficiency become massive barriers. And the project ran out of money before the final test ever happened. That gap between dream and data left room for a myth. Some say financiers buried the idea to protect oil profits. Others say the tower was just an unfinished dream. Patents and plans survive. So do realistic engineering reports showing massive land, frequency, and safety obstacles for true planet-wide beaming. So which is it? Conspiracy or limitation? Honestly, both stories live together. The inventor dreamed big. The math pushed back, hard. The real question isn't whether the idea sounds magical. It's whether anyone can build it at scale without frying half the countryside. Tesla wired and wrote, like a man who believed the earth itself could sing with power. But the core problem isn't imagination. It's physics. A beaming energy at useful density means tight focus. Even small misalignment scatters power into heat. The atmosphere absorbs and scatters. Storms and humidity steal efficiency. To light a city, you'd need huge receivers, repeaters, and safety buffers, keeping people far from the beam. Modern engineers are trying a version of this dream. Space-based solar collectors capture sunlight where it's strongest and beam microwaves down to receiving farms. On paper, it works. The challenge is scale and cost. Building orbital arrays and ground collectors takes material, launch capacity, and decades of investment. That's not magic. That's industrial scale engineering. And this is where the suppression myth grows teeth. The tower failed because of money, legal fights, and a shrinking market. But people prefer a villain to plain bankruptcy. So stories form. Did financiers silence a genius? Or did an expensive experiment just run out of runway? The auction records and court filings point to failure, not a secret conspiracy. Still, the story matters. The dream forces engineers to keep asking what's possible. Space-based power and directed beaming remain active research, precisely because the payoff would be enormous. Big ideas need big engineering and transparent tests. The unanswered record hidden in bankruptcy papers isn't proof of a buried energy source. It's an invitation. Did the world lose a workable technology, or just an unfinished vision that needed more time and cash? Stanley Meyer, Water Fuel Cell. You watch a grainy clip of a car sipping a glass of water, and the comments explode. The idea is simple and irresistible. Put water into a device, split it into hydrogen and oxygen with almost no input. Feed the engine, forget gasoline. What actually matters? Splitting water is called electrolysis, and it needs energy. The amount you put in has to at least match what you take out. That's thermodynamics. Machines leak heat. Wires lose power. No clever circuit changes that basic balance without an outside energy source. Meyer insisted he'd found a special method using resonant pulses to break water apart with tiny input. Independent engineers tested the setup and found nothing mysterious. Courts examined the evidence, and in 1996, the legal finding was fraud. That ruling is public record. It doesn't prove a vast conspiracy. It proves the claim failed controlled tests. So why do the stories persist? Because people want a simple fix. The image of skipping the gas pump and filling up with tap water is emotionally powerful. Sellers and promoters amplify that hope, creating a myth that looks like suppression to anyone who wants to believe. If a device truly produced net energy from water, it'd be tested, replicated, and published within months. The stubborn absence of reproducible results doesn't point to a hidden miracle. It points to wishful thinking dressed up as science. Many independent teams tried to reproduce the effect, failed. Labs repeated the circuit, measured every input and output carefully, and found ordinary losses. Tiny currents and wiring heat explained the apparent gain. Bad calorimetry and optimistic counting make miracles look real when they aren't. The court case hammered in another nail. Witnesses testified. The experts showed the device didn't produce excess energy. Fraud, that was the legal word. A court ruling doesn't settle every scientific question, but it does show that under real scrutiny, the method couldn't prove its extraordinary promise. Why won't this story die? Because it's perfect. It promises salvation from expensive fuel, asks almost nothing from the audience, and matches a deeper suspicion that big industry hides solutions. Social media turns short clips into legends. If someone discovers a real, reproducible method that changes the energy balance, the world won't hide it. Labs will test it openly. Companies and universities will race to scale it. The reason that isn't happening isn't proof of conspiracy. It's replication failing. Over and over, bold promises need bold proof. Until then, the tale of water-powered cars stays a powerful myth and a warning about what happens when measurement takes a back seat to money. Cold fusion. The day in 1989 when two chemists, Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons, announced they'd achieved nuclear fusion on a tabletop felt like a science thriller. Labs around the world leaned in. If tiny cells really produced more heat than the power you fed them, you could generate vast energy from cheap materials. Careers, reputations, and Nobel dreams were on the line. The test everyone expected was straightforward. Measure the energy going in, measure the heat coming out, count every wire and thermometer. That's where trouble started. The effect, if it exists at all, is small. Small enough to hide behind measurement errors. Instruments drift. Water evaporates and takes heat with it. Contaminants can fake nuclear signals. Some teams reported strange excess heat. Others found nothing. Follow-up reviews uncovered poorly controlled experiments and a painful lack of independent replication. Fleischmann and Pons went from heroes to cautionary tales in months. Their reputations were shredded. Pons eventually left the country. The mainstream response was rejection, but a small group of researchers kept working quietly. Private labs and startups surfaced later with fresh announcements, including a famous device called the E-Cat that promised commercial heat. Those promises hit the same wall: skepticism, transparency questions, and testing that never quite satisfied critics. What would actually settle this? Run a device in a blinded lab, measure every watt in and out, and airtight calorimetry. Independent teams repeating the exact procedure. If nuclear ash or consistent neutron signatures show up, physics has to pay attention. No choice. Recent years brought renewed private funding and papers claiming anomalies. Some groups report excess heat that survives tighter controls. Others find nothing above noise. The problem? Tiny signals drowning in apparatus effects. Heat hides in pipes. Radiation detectors need careful calibration. Small errors masquerade as miracles. Scaling would be another mountain entirely. Even if a small cell produced steady excess heat, you'd still need to prove material durability, fuel availability, byproduct safety, and device economics. The leap from a benchtop curiosity to powering cities isn't one step. It's decades of cross-lab work. Why the persistence of hope? Because the upside is staggering. That halo attracts both genuine scientists and hucksters. And the cure is openness. Publish raw data, detailed protocols, blind replication attempts. Secrecy and closed demos breed exactly the doubt that kills credibility. Where does cold fusion actually stand? LENR remains an open experimental question, not an accepted energy source. It demands patient work, transparent methods, and independent verification before anyone should argue it. Scales to planetary power. Magnetic motors. You see a ring of magnets spin forever in a video, and it looks like the simplest possible miracle. The machine seems to need no fuel. It feels like magic, because magnets pull and push without wires. And that makes the idea absurdly seductive. What does physics actually say? Magnets push. They pull. But a magnetic field is conservative, meaning if you follow a closed loop, gains and losses cancel out perfectly. You want continuous work? You've got to add energy somewhere. Builders often hide that input. A battery, a concealed motor, clever mechanical tricks that store energy and release it unevenly. Common mistakes explain almost every demo. Measurement errors, wires, hidden contacts, and bearing friction masking real power flows. Magnets lose strength slowly when stressed, and that slow fade can look like free energy for a short window. Many demos run until the magnets warm or shift, and then quietly fail. Famous names are attached to the myth, and legal battles over patents make for great conspiracy fuel. The reality is simpler than the stories. No independently verified, a sustained over unity motor has ever passed rigorous testing. Not one. If someone actually proved a true magnet motor, the first move wouldn't be a YouTube video. It'd be public replication across multiple labs. Why do these stories survive? Because they look simple, magnets feel mysterious, and hope always finds a story that won't die. The test is clear and brutal. Close the loop. Measure every input and output. Let the world try to copy it. You saw that spinning ring and felt a jolt of possibility. The real story is quieter and more mechanical. Most demos show motion that looks like endless power. What they hide is how long it actually runs and where the energy first came from. A small push, a spring, a warm bearing, a subtle battery connection. Any of these keep things moving long enough for a clever clip. Magnets reorient or heat under stress, changing forces temporarily. An arrangement might coast for minutes before slowing. And for someone making a dramatic video, minutes is all you need. For science? Nowhere near enough. A proper test is straightforward to describe and brutally hard to cheat. Lock the device down, measure every electrical input, track mechanical losses and thermal changes. Let independent labs copy the setup with full access. Repeat over long runs with fresh magnets. If output stays above input without hidden feeds. That's the moment a claim moves from myth to discovery. Patents and sellers muddy the waters because a colorful inventor plus a hopeful crowd creates demand. Products sell in small runs that collapse when scaled. That feeds conspiracy thinking. People hear buyout and assume suppression. Usually it's a rushed pitch or a product that simply doesn't scale. Curiosity plus rigor. That's always the right call. Test openly, publish raw data, let others build it. That's how breakthroughs survive the spotlight. Until then, the dream of a magic motor stays exactly what it is. A useful test of how we sort wonder from evidence. Floyd Sweet Vacuum Triode Amplifier. Picture an isolated garage lab. Coils stacked like silent bells. A man listening for something no one else could hear. Sweet insisted his device drew steady energy without any fuel. He and his supporters said it tapped what they called space energy or zero-point energy. The idea in plain words? Even empty space isn't truly empty. Tiny fluctuations ripple through it constantly. Some inventors argue you can harvest those jitters and turn them into steady power. It sounds like science fiction, and it sounds like the perfect secret. The big test is straightforward to say and maddening to do. Measure every watt going in, every watt leaving. Account for heat, stray currents, and every hidden wire. In practice, that's where most stories fall apart. Small measurement errors, grounded equipment, and subtle magnetic effects can mimic extra power when there isn't any. Sweet presented papers and demonstrations, and enthusiasts still point to those records today. Skeptics point somewhere else, missing replication and ambiguous instrumentation. Mainstream physics wants a clear theoretical mechanism and repeatable experiments that other labs can actually copy. Without that, the claim sits in shadowy territory between anecdote and proof. If a device truly extracted vacuum energy, the implications would be massive. Physics would need serious revision, and engineers would race to scale it. That's exactly why the demands are so strict. Extraordinary payoff requires extraordinary proof. What happens when you look at actual replication attempts? Do modern standards find anything real? Supporters point to recorded tests and a handful of patents, saying the data shows something odd. Critics answer with a checklist. Were the instruments grounded correctly? Did the wiring hide a stray connection? Were thermal losses fully counted? Those questions matter. When signals are small, tiny errors matter more than you'd think. Some teams tried to replicate Sweet's work and couldn't match steady output. Others reported transient effects that vanished under tighter controls. The pattern is consistent. Anomalies appear. They attract enthusiasm, and then better controlled tests either explain them or expose flawed setups. Repeatable results are the gatekeeper. And that gate doesn't budge. There's a theoretical side worth noting. Quantum field theory does allow for vacuum fluctuations and subtle effects like the Casimir force, real, measurable phenomena. But converting them into steady, scalable power is another order of difficulty entirely. You'd need a reliable coupling mechanism, materials that survive long runs, and energy flow orders of magnitude above thermal noise. Nobody's shown all of that together. If a device ever extracted net energy from the vacuum, it'd trigger a storm. Universities would publish open protocols. Independent labs would race to confirm or refute. Companies would pour money in. That's how real breakthroughs leave the lab and enter the world. For now, Sweet left intriguing notes and a few demonstrations, but not the kind of transparent, repeatable data that moves a claim into mainstream acceptance. The subject sits in a borderline zone where careful experiments could be valuable, but wild claims have to meet the strictest standards, no exceptions. The next invention on our list promised to pull vast electrical power straight from invisible cosmic rays. Its story includes sabotage, rejected patents, and a secret Swedish crystal, T. Henry Moray radiant energy device. Picture a lab in Salt Lake City in the 1930s. Banks of light bulbs blazing, not a single power line in sight. Thomas Henry Moray said his device tapped what he called radiant energy, a cosmic hum that fills all of space. He reported outputs of up to 50,000 watts from a tabletop box, all powered by a mysterious crystal he'd found in Sweden. He called it a Cosray receiver, and laid out his theory in a manuscript called The Sea of Energy in Which the Earth Floats. The core idea was bold. Space isn't empty. It vibrates with energy, and the right circuit can drink from it. Demonstrations drew scientists, investors, and crowds of the genuinely curious. Witnesses watched rows of lamps blaze, motors spin, heaters warm, all without any obvious fuel source. 50,000 watts from a box on a table. Let that number sit for a second. But Moray never disclosed the full design. He kept the crystal and key circuit details locked away, insisting that powerful interests would bury the technology the moment the complete blueprint went public. The U.S. Patent Office rejected his applications, and their reasoning was blunt. The device appeared to violate known physics and looked like perpetual motion. Without a testable theoretical mechanism, they treated the entire thing as implausible. That rejection poured gasoline on the suppression narrative. Then violence entered the record. An assistant named Felix Fraser reportedly took an axe to the converter and destroyed it in the lab. No clear reason was ever given. The original machine was destroyed again in 1941. under circumstances Morey described as sabotage and infiltration. He reported assassination attempts and believed energy cartels had targeted him personally. His son John spent decades trying to rebuild the converter. He lit a few bulbs, but never came close to the 50,000 watt levels his father had shown. Key components were gone, the full recipe incomplete, and the mystery only deepened. Skeptics point to atmospheric electricity and stray radio signals as explanations. A well-placed antenna and clever circuit can harvest real but modest energy from the environment. Enough to explain a small glow without needing new physics. Supporters fire back with witness lists and the sheer scale of the reported output. 50,000 watts is far beyond anything atmospheric tricks can explain. They believe the invention was real and that money and power crushed it before it reached the world. The deeper physics question, does the universe actually offer a harvestable ocean of energy? And quantum theory allows for vacuum fluctuations and zero-point energy. And those are real, but the leap to a practical machine that extracts useful power from them? That's never been demonstrated under controlled conditions. Not once. If the device worked as Morey described, open replication would settle it. Build the circuit, source the crystal, publish every watt, in and out. The fact that decades of effort by passionate followers haven't reproduced the original performance says something. Whether it says the design was incomplete or the original story was overstated, that's the question nobody can quite answer. Searl effect generator. You see a ring of rollers humming in a video, and someone swears the whole machine floats and powers a house. A John Roy Searl grew up in 1940s England and said he'd built his first magnetic device as a teenager, and that it accidentally levitated right off his workbench. By the 1960s, he was telling anyone who'd listen that his Searl effect generator could produce electricity and anti-gravity from spinning magnets. The story reads like science fiction, crossed with a carnival show. The core claim in plain language. A set of concentric rings and rollers, arranged with specific magnets and metal plates, will, when spinning, produce continuous electricity, and sometimes lift off the ground. Supporters say the motion reorganizes magnetic fields into something entirely new. Sounds incredible. Sounds tidy. Sounds like exactly the kind of thing you'd want to be real. What actually matters is the evidence. Videos show motion and shimmering metal. Websites sell stories of secret demonstrations and government interest. But real science lives and dies by data you can check. And that's where things get thin. Independent labs that attempted repeatable tests found small effects and big questions. Was the measured power coming from hidden batteries or external wiring? Were the mounts influencing the motion? Could mechanical balance and gyroscopic tricks explain a short burst of apparent levitation? Those are exactly the questions that kill the miracle and reveal ordinary causes. The deeper problem is reproducibility. Searl and his close followers controlled access to the full device. Without open designs and instrumented replications, the claim stays anecdote. Interesting anecdote, but anecdote. And serious engineers want clear electrical logs, input and output, long runs under controlled loads, and independent teams copying the build step by step. Until that happens, the tale sits alongside many hopeful inventions that never survived the brutal test of replication. Technicians who gained full access to variants looked for continuous power and long-term lift. They asked for logged input, steady load tests, extended runs. What they found: short bursts, odd wiring, and gaps in the data. Mechanical balance and gyroscopic effects can mimic levitation. A spinning assembly lifts slightly when supports flex. That motion looks dramatic in a 30-second clip. Electrical tricks create apparent output. Hidden batteries, intermittent external feeds, or measurement points placed downstream of a clever circuit explain many of the reported readings. When engineers demanded raw logs and blind trials, the magic faded. Patents and promotional stories made the myth profitable. People filed applications, followers marketed replicas, buyouts were promised. That economic pressure turns hope into product fast, and repeatability into an afterthought. People hear buyout and assume suppression. Usually, it's a rushed pitch or a product that falls apart at scale. The real test is strict. Build an open version, publish the full plans, let 3 independent labs assemble the device from the same parts, run instrumented tests with no outside power allowed. Record every wire, every millivolt, every gram of force. And if independent teams find sustained power and clear lift, the claim moves into science. Until then, marvel at the idea, demand the data. This machine is a lesson in how spectacle meets sloppy metrics, and why open replication is the only antidote: thorium reactors. You probably never heard this name in school, but thorium sits quietly in the ground, 3 to 4 times more abundant than uranium, and it could have changed everything. Now, I need to be upfront about something. This one's different from every other entry on the list. This isn't fringe science or garage inventors. This is proven nuclear physics that actually worked, and then got deliberately shelved. In the 1960s, a brilliant physicist named Alvin Weinberg ran Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He championed a reactor design using liquid fluoride salts and thorium instead of solid uranium fuel rods. A test reactor, the molten salt reactor experiment, ran successfully for over 13,000 hours. That's not a claim. That's logged data from a national laboratory. Why does thorium matter? It's abundant and cheap to mine. Thorium reactors produce far less long-lived radioactive waste. The fuel cycle makes it nearly impossible to produce weapons-grade material. And a molten salt design can't melt down the way a traditional reactor can. That last point deserves a pause. The reactor operates at normal pressure. If something goes wrong, the fuel drains into a safe collection tank by gravity alone. No steam explosion, no Chernobyl, no Fukushima, just physics doing what physics does. So why aren't we running on thorium right now? This is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable, because the answer leads straight into the most credible suppression story on this entire list. Weinberg pushed hard for the safer thorium path. The military and political establishment wanted uranium, because uranium breeds plutonium, and plutonium makes nuclear weapons. Weinberg was fired from Oak Ridge in 1973. His supporters say he was silenced for championing a technology that threatened both the weapons program and the uranium fuel industry. The historical record shows a documented policy choice with devastating consequences. The decision wasn't hidden in shadows. Meeting notes and policy documents survive. Weinberg himself wrote about it publicly. The tragedy isn't that the information was concealed, it's that nobody in power cared enough to change direction. The uranium path won because it served 2 goals at once: electricity and bombs. That dual use made it politically irresistible during the Cold War. Thorium served only one goal: clean, safe power. And that wasn't enough to compete. Billions poured into uranium infrastructure: enrichment plants, fuel rod factories, waste storage. All of it locked the world into one path. Switching to thorium meant writing off decades of investment and building a new supply chain from scratch. Critics of the suppression angle point to real engineering challenges. Thorium fuel cycles need different chemical processing. Molten salts corrode standard pipes over time. Materials science still had catching up to do. Those are genuine problems, not cover stories. But here's the counter-argument that's hard to dismiss. The problems are solvable, and several countries are proving it right now. India and China are actively building thorium reactor programs today. The physics checks out, and so does the chemistry, which almost never happens in this world. People died in uranium accidents that a thorium design might have prevented. Waste piled up that a thorium cycle would have largely avoided. The cost of that single policy decision is measured in real harm, not just lost potential. Thorium isn't free energy. It isn't magic. It's real nuclear physics with real engineering challenges. But the record shows a technology that was deliberately deprioritized for reasons that had more to do with weapons than with watts. If thorium had received half the funding that uranium got, the energy map of the world might look completely different today. The tech isn't forbidden. It was defunded at a critical moment and left to wait while the world burned coal and split uranium. That wait may finally be ending. Hendershot fuelless generator. The year is 1928, and a man from Pittsburgh claims he's built a small box that draws electricity straight from the Earth's magnetic field. Lester Hendershot said his generator needed no fuel, no battery, no external connection. He said it converted the planet's own magnetic field directly into usable current. Plug nothing in, power comes out. The demonstrations were convincing enough to attract serious attention. Reports say Charles Lindbergh, the most famous aviator alive at that time, personally witnessed a demo and came away impressed. Newspapers ran the story hard. The core idea sounds almost reasonable because the Earth genuinely does have a powerful magnetic field. We use compass needles to prove it every day. The question is whether you can extract meaningful power from it with a passive device just sitting on a table. The physics check. A static magnetic field doesn't deliver energy on its own. To generate current, you need changing flux, moving parts, spinning coils, oscillating fields. A box sitting still in a steady field doesn't meet that requirement, not without something hidden inside. Hendershot never published full schematics. He demonstrated the device to selected audiences between 1928 and 1960, but kept the inner workings private. That secrecy became both his shield and his weakness. Without open designs, independent engineers couldn't verify or replicate the claims. The scientific community moved on. The public didn't. The suppression narrative around Hendershot is vivid and disturbing. Reports circulated that his laboratory was searched and his notes confiscated. He reportedly grew nervous and anxious, telling associates that powerful forces wanted his work destroyed. In 1961, Hendershot was found dead. He'd planned a final attempt to reveal his generator to engineering groups that same year. That timing haunts people, and it still fuels suspicion today. Skeptics offer simpler explanations. Hidden batteries or induction from nearby power lines could produce the effects shown in limited demonstrations. Without a controlled test in a shielded lab with full instrumentation, you simply can't separate the claims from clever staging. The broader question, could the Earth's magnetic field ever serve as a practical energy source? The field is real and enormous in total scale. But at any given point on the surface, it's weak and steady. Harvesting useful power would require either colossal collection areas or an unknown coupling mechanism that no experiment has demonstrated. That doesn't make it impossible. It makes it unproven. Several groups have tried over the decades to build Hendershot-style generators from fragmentary plans and secondhand descriptions. Results have been mixed at best. Some report brief anomalies. None have shown sustained, independently verified output. A striking claim, a charismatic inventor, limited access. A tragic ending, and decades of unresolved questions. The lesson isn't that the idea is worthless. It's that secrecy is the enemy of proof, always has been, perpetual motion. The picture is irresistible. A machine spins and runs, and people whisper that it never needs fuel. You feel that tug of possibility. Who wouldn't want endless free power? The plain physics fits in one line. Energy can't appear from nowhere. The first law of thermodynamics says energy is conserved. The second says every real process creates waste. Those laws aren't theoretical, they're testable, and they've been tested millions of times. Build a closed device. Measure what goes in and what comes out. If the machine produces more than you gave it, something's wrong with the measurement or the setup, not with the laws of physics. Common errors explain almost every perpetual motion claim. Hidden inputs are one. A small battery, a clever coupling to an external field, or a temporary storage device can make a demo look miraculous for a while. Measurement mistakes are the other usual suspect. Heat hides in pipes, bearings warm and change friction, and video misleads because it almost always hides long-term runs and instrument logs. That doesn't stop suppression stories from growing. People see an unfinished tower or a failed patent and fill the blanks with motive. Buyouts and secrecy orders fuel the imagination. And let's be clear about one thing. Governments can issue secrecy orders on patents for national security reasons. That's documented law. Nobody disputes it. But it's not the same as a systematic corporate burial of valid physics. So where does that actually leave us? Perpetual motion as a working power source fails the simplest tests every single time. Yet the social story persists, because the promise is enormous and the debunking is technical. The deeper question isn't just why the machines fail, but whether any credible invention has ever been legally suppressed, and what the real documents show. The law does allow some secrecy, but it's narrow and specific. Secrecy orders cover weapons, sensors, cryptography, certain defense materials. They don't give anyone blanket power to bury every radical invention. The practical difference you need to know: a secrecy order delays public patent filing for documented reasons. A buyout happens when a company pays for rights and decides not to commercialize. Both hide details for a time. Neither proves a device works or that some global cover-up exists. So how do you test a suppression claim? 3 steps. First, ask for documentary evidence: a patent record, a secrecy order notice, a court transcript. Second, check independent replication. If a device truly works, others will show it. Third, examine plausibility. Does the claim violate basic conservation laws? If it does, extraordinary evidence isn't optional. Those 3 checks cut through most legends. Many stories collapse under simple scrutiny. People misread a secrecy list entry and assume global conspiracy. Others mistake early investor deals for suppression. The healthy approach mixes curiosity with verification. Real breakthroughs survive public testing and open engineering. My final point is simple, and it matters. The world loses nothing from careful skepticism. It loses everything when wishful thinking replaces measurement.